Cool.
Attention, all of you CPT puppets. Our Puppetry Chat podcast will begin very, very soon. So I advise you all to come to the recording studio right away.
My whole life just flashed before my eyes.
So, who's our guest for today? Let's see.
I told her that I wanted to play space, and she said that she has a moon for me.
Everybody, and welcome to the third episode of Puppetry Chat. Wow! Don't mind that. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Puppetry Chat podcast. Today we have a very, very special guest. I hope I pronounce your last name right. Chris Palmieri. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you very much. Close enough. It's you know what it is it's not pronounced the way it looks. It's just pronounced Palmieri, but it used to be in Italy it would have been pronounced Palmieri, so that's why it's spelled that way.
Okay.
Yeah, but you had a good job. You were better than most
Thank you for
people.
telling me that. I'm bad at just pronouncing stuff sometimes.
I understand. You had a good first attempt, honestly, better than most people.
Okay. Well, thank you. Now, Chris, for those of you who don't know, has done lots of puppetry on screen and on stage. He performed Snug in Sprout House. He played King Carlophosaurus in Jim Henson's Dinosaur Train Live. He plays an important role with the Field Station Dinosaurs. He built puppets and directed for Dinosaur Daredevil. He's done... He worked on a stage show version of The Little Mermaid. And he performed and wrangled for... Oh, this is my favorite title I've ever read on this show. Berkey and the Toes.
Oh, that's true.
So... Now, Chris, first things first, what was your very first exposure to puppetry?
That's a great question. So, I have been a fan of puppets since I was a kid, although I didn't really think about doing it for a career until I was an adult. But I used to watch Sesame Street, Muppets, Fraggle Rock, Lamb Chop, Allegra's Window, Eureka's Castle, Bear in the Big Blue House. All those shows were pretty popular when I was a kid, and I had a little drawer of different toy puppets that my parents used to play with me, and that was kind of my earliest. And then later on in high school, I played with puppets a little bit. I did stop motion, and then after that, I kind of forgot about it until after I got out of college, about a year afterwards, and I got into puppetry then, and I haven't stopped since.
That's awesome. So now we'll talk a bit about Sprout House. Now, can you tell us a bit about how you working on Sprout House really sprouted? Only a few minutes in, I've already got puns. So tell us a bit about Sprout House.
Sure thing. So Sprout House, it was later rebranded to be Snug's House, and the reason for that is because Universal Kids, which is NBC's kids network, used to be called Sprout or Sprout TV. And so when they changed that, we were still called Sprout House, and they were like not really sure how to bridge the gap between the old brand and the new brand. So they did rebrand it to Snug's House, which is what it's called now, but you could find both of them online. And on my website, I think I still have Sprout's House a few times. But basically, the way that worked was I saw the audition notice. I don't have an agent for my work here in New York for puppetry. I just self-represent, and I look for my own gigs. So I saw the ad on an email chain that puppeteers kind of share around to, and it wasn't really clear what it was. They actually didn't tell you anything about it. They had a different name. He wasn't named Snug in the audition. My co-host Carly, they didn't write Carly's name in the script because she goes by Carly on screen as well. They had a different name, and she wasn't in the initial audition. And I think I ended up doing 4 auditions. I did the first audition and then 3 callbacks over the course of 4 months. So it was like, I got the audition, it went really well. And that was around the time that I started to really feel, and I had been working for like 7 or 8 years now at that point. That was around the time that I started really feeling like I knew how to audition. Like I could consistently go into a room and do what I meant to do and do my best. And so what that means, though, for me was that if I didn't get it, I know I did my best. So it wasn't like I messed up, and that's why. It was like I just wasn't what they were looking for, and I can't control that. But so I went in. I'm sorry, I'm rambling a bit. I went in, and I ended up going back 3 times. So every 2 weeks, I would get an email or a phone call, and they'd say, "We want you to come back again." And then there would be 2 weeks from then. So it was just like all this like constant, like every buzz of my phone, I was thinking about it and wondering, because this was my first series and it was the biggest thing I'd worked on at that point. And then I went in for the fourth one. I left. It had gone down. We had I think it went from 50 people to 5 people to 3 people to me and one other person, who I actually have worked with and is a wonderful puppeteer as well. And then I ended up getting it. They called me one day. They said, come in. We want to talk to you about coming on board. And then I worked on the show for about 2 years on and off. And then they did wrap up production on all of their original content. Universal Kids no longer produces new content, from my understanding. And so we did stop production, but you can still see it every day on TV. It's on YouTube and on video on demand.
That's awesome. Yeah, I remember watching from time to time because my grandparents had Sprout, and I remember watching Sprout House years ago.
Really?
And I remember before that when it was the Sunny Side Up show. So
that's right. Yes. Yeah.
So do you have any favorite memories from performing Snug on the show?
Oh yeah, I mean really almost all of it. It was one of the most fun times I had working. It was so great to work on a character. So, you have theater where you play the same character many times. You have film where you play a character going through maybe different things, but it's still just the one time. But with TV, you get to play the same character over the course of time in different situations, and you get to develop them, and you get to have a relationship with the writers and the producers and the directors and your co-stars. And what was really cool was I started having things where Snug would, I just would come up with things on the fly when we were shooting, and then the writers would write those into the new scripts. So one example is Snug, when he gets excited, he goes yeah. And that's a thing that I just did. And then they would write it in, yeah, like when he would get excited about something. They would write in, I came up with his laugh and his voice and everything, and they would kind of write to that. So it was no longer me adapting what they were writing with the character. It was, and then I even got to pitch things too. We did a series of videos called Dino of the Day, where Snug basically did this really high energy, really bubbly, upbeat rap about 5 different dinosaurs. And I'm a big dinosaur fan, as my resume probably gives away. And and so I got to actually pitch that, and then that was so much fun. And I got to work in the voiceover booth for all the songs. Those were all pre-recorded, and we got to work with people like Jimmy Fallon and the Wiggles and Dolly Parton. I mean,
Jimmy Fallon was my favorite guest on that show.
Yeah, he was great. Later. He was so nice. So all of that, I mean, I wish I could come up with a more specific answer, but honestly, I just got to work. I got to work on something that I knew was going to be on national television and seen by thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, and with some of the best people I've ever worked with. And it was also really just nice to have a gig for a long time that put me in a pretty good place, because as a freelancer, part of being in the arts and being a performer is that things are inconsistent. You don't know where your next job's coming from. So it was really nice to have a period of my life where things were consistent for a little while. So that was great. It was just all great. I miss it.
Yeah. You mentioned them having guests. Do you have a favorite Sprout House guest star that was on, or is that?
I love them all, but the 3 I mentioned, Jimmy Fallon, Dolly Parton, and the Wiggles, were probably my top 3.
Yeah, I remember catching the Jimmy Fallon appearance when it aired.
Really?
When he was doing the llama, he has the ears and everything. Do the llama.
That's right. That's right. Oh, it was so fun. That was to promote his kids' book, Everything is Mama, and the gag was that we thought it was Everything is Llama, so we threw him a llama party.
Ah, okay.
He's very tall. I didn't realize how tall he was.
Yeah.
And it was fun because we shot on the same floor as The Tonight Show. So we would go to the 6th floor in Rockefeller Center in NBC in New York City, where 30 Rock took place. And, I would walk by the SNL studio on my way to lunch. And at that time, Jimmy Fallon and Megyn Kelly, who were both on our show, were also shooting on our same floor. So I saw them in passing a couple times. And after I had shot with Jimmy, I did actually say hi to him in the hallway. And I'm not sure if he fully knew who I was, because I didn't have the puppet and I wasn't in the set, but he knew me. I could tell in his eyes. So he just said hi, and it was nice. It was cool to be able to just say hi to someone who I've been watching on TV for years.
Wow. Did you ever get to visit the set of The Tonight Show, or?
No, I never got to go in. I saw it I peeked in a lot, and I was there a lot. So basically, I would be there when they were doing their rehearsals. So they'll actually shoot. They'll bring another audience in, and Jimmy will come out in like a casual shirt with notes and like run through everything they're going to do and do like a rehearsal version, all the jokes. The band will practice. And we were actually right across the way from the place where the musicians, their dressing rooms and area to hang out was. So we would see a lot of cool music acts coming through. But I never actually got to go in. I meant to get tickets for a while, and I just never found the time. I'm sure I could still get tickets if I don't know. I probably know someone who still works there.
That's awesome. Now, can you talk a little bit about Dinosaur Train Live?
Sure. So that was a really fun project. I was really lucky to work on that. That was my first national tour. No, that's not true. That was my second national tour, but it was the first time we actually went international. We went to Canada, which was cool.
That's where I am.
You're in Canada? Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were on the east side of like up from New York. That's where we were. So I don't know. Was it Toronto? I guess.
I think
London,
so.
Ontario. We were in London, Ontario. That's where we were.
That's where I am.
That's where you are. Oh my gosh.
Yes. Yes. I never got to see it though, unfortunately. But, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, it would have been great to have you come. It would have been so fun. Yeah, that was a long time ago. So that was really cool. I had actually auditioned for another production that company put up called Imagination, which I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're hopefully going to get one of the people who worked on that show on this.
Oh, really?
Soon.
Very cool.
We don't know for sure.
I'll definitely have to check that out.
Yeah.
So I had auditioned for that. I got callbacks the year before, and they ended up not going with me. And they had told me, oh, we were really hoping we'd see you again for Dinosaur Train. And then I went in, and I went to the callback, and it was a dance callback. And I'm not the best dancer. It's something I have to really work to get good. But then they ended up casting me as King, and they called me and they said, listen, we know that maybe dancing is not your thing, but this puppet can't dance. This is a big puppet, and we need someone who's good at big puppets. And even though I've gotten to do a lot of the hand and rod on camera, I've also been really fortunate with Field Station Dinosaurs and a lot of big full body puppets. So that was kind of what they were interested in me for. And that was really cool to me to know that my specialty skill set could kind of give me an edge. And we toured with them for 6 months. I was in the original cast. We got to meet Craig Bartlett, who was the creator. There we go. So we got to meet Craig Bartlett, who worked on the show, and who created the show. We got to a lot of other cool stuff like that.
Ah, that's awesome. So what's our next?
Did you hear me?
Now, I was gonna save this one, but I think it's something that our viewers should know before we continue. Now, can you tell everyone about the major differences that there are between stage puppetry and screen puppetry?
Sure. So one of the big
differences.
One of the big things on that is the most relevant is that on film you're actually looking at a monitor that shows you what the TV camera sees. So with stage, you kind of fake the eye line. You know that if I point my middle finger here where the nose is, if I point the nose of the puppet at something, it looks reasonably like I'm looking at it. But on camera, everything is so subtle. And so it doesn't really matter how good of a puppeteer you are. If I can't see what I'm doing, I might just be too high. I might not look in the camera correctly. I might, and so one of the big things is that we have a little TV on the ground, a monitor that shows us what the TV camera sees. And unlike when you film with your phone, it's opposite to what you're doing. So when I go this way, the puppet goes that way. And you have to get used to that. And sometimes with film puppetry, they built the set 5 feet up in the air, and that's the best because you're standing. But most of the time, you're crunched down on the ground somewhere because it's a lot to build a five. Sorry about that. So for Snug's house, I was on a little like a mechanic that I had rollerblade wheels, and I was scooching around. So that's one major difference is you're kind of watching your own performance, and you're very cognizant of it. And then I think another thing is that on film, a lot of the time you're doing the voice yourself, whereas on stage, it's a little more mixed, where sometimes you're doing a pre-recorded track, that's pretty common, or maybe you're playing a character that doesn't talk at all.
Mime. Yeah, so now next question. Can you talk a little bit about Berkey and the Toes?
Yeah, so Berkey and the Toes was a really fun series of online ads for Birkenstock sandals. I actually have over there somewhere. is a really nice pair of sandals I got. In addition to being paid to work on it, they gave us a free pair of shoes, which was fun. And
Nice.
basically, Berkey and the Toes was these collection of these blue puppets, which were really fun, where they were, you had your hand in front of you with the head. You controlled their arm, the left arm, and then their legs were attached to your green screen suits behind them. So we were able to have full body articulation of the puppet, and we had the monitor off to the side, and then we were on a green screen with green head to toe, and they just got rid of us. And so it was a really fun way to shoot. It was a really cool form of puppetry to get to do, and they put that on their Instagram, on their website, and then I think the puppets were on display at their store in Soho for a few months after that. And I played this character. I played a character called Helmut, and they were this German band, and they have not been in the United States for very long, but they love Birkenstocks, and they're here to sing wonderful songs about the Birkenstocks and show everyone about the new store in Soho. And yeah, I was the guitarist, and I had this long hair on my puppet that I got to do like a headbang with, and it was really fun.
He was probably the funniest out of them all. I've watched a few of them, and just
thank you so much. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Yeah, that was a really fun. That was one day of shooting, and it was a lot. It was one of those things where it really should have been, for everything they wanted to shoot, we really should have had 2 or 3 days, and they really just kind of rushed to get as much done as possible. But I think we ended up doing something really good there, and I was really happy to be part of it.
All right, so this next question. Do you have a favorite character you performed, or is that like choosing your favorite child? Like,
yeah, you know, I kind of have 2 categories, right? I've got the characters I performed for other people, and then I've got my characters, you know, like you see behind me, Lucky Duck, and that's really hard for me to choose a favorite because I love all my characters. But if I had to pick 2 favorites of the characters I've gotten to perform out in the world, it would be Snug for sure, and then the next one would be the T-Rex from Field Station Dinosaurs. It's another large mechanical dinosaur puppet, but it's a little more expressive, and I get to make the sounds as well compared to the King puppet, which was a little more limited, even though it was bigger, and we just lip sync to the cartoon voices. So those are my 2 favorite characters that I've really ever played that I didn't make.
That's awesome. Yeah, so that was the next question. Can you tell us a little about the Field Station Dinosaurs?
Sure. So Field Station Dinosaurs is an outdoor educational theme park which features over 32 life-size animatronic dinosaurs, as well as our main stage show features a 15-foot-long, 100-pound, full-body mechanical T-Rex puppet that me and our team of performers get inside of. And basically the way it works is, if you look at the video of it, you know, the T-Rex is built very differently from us, where their head and their tail are parallel to the ground, and they balance around the center point of their legs. So we stand up right between the legs of the puppet. Our feet are attached to their feet, and when we walk, the feet come with us. And we're wearing basically a big hiking backpack in there to control the body. And then we have 2 rods in front of us, or I guess, what would you call them? 2 controls that are attached to a series of rods that so if I do this, the head goes down. My cat is here to say hello. And if I do this, the head goes up. And if I do this, the head goes that way and that way. And then we can actually move the whole thing in there to make the neck move. And we have a microphone on, so we make any noise. And there's a guitar distortion pedal hooked up to a subwoofer in there, which makes everything big and deep and loud and distorted. So I'll be like, and it'll make... And that already kind of sounds like a dinosaur, but it'll make it even more, like I said, loud and deep. And then there's a bite brake mechanism that controls the mouth and the eyes. And so we do that for our main stage show. And I've also been really fortunate to get to develop shows and direct and build puppets for them as well, including a 20-minute black light puppet show where the puppeteers wear all black, similar to the green screen idea. And then all the puppets are painted with UV paint, so they glow underneath a UV light. And we turn the regular lights off, and it's all black behind us. And so the puppets appear to be moving, flying, swimming, floating, all on their own. And it's about the history of animal flight. And that was a really cool thing, because I built the puppets and I directed the show. So that was really cool.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I've been there. That was my first professional puppetry job, was doing the T-Rex for them. And 2 years later, I ended up being the lead puppeteer, and I've been there for 9 years now.
Oh, cool. That's awesome. Yeah. So now our next question, because I was going to ask, how do you go about with the process of like building a puppet?
That's a great question. So typically we start, and I think I have one somewhere around here, if I can find it. We start with a design, especially if I'm it for a client. I don't know if I have. Oh, there it is. So here's one of a puppet that I'm actually working on for a client right now. So, you know, it's just a sketch of what the puppet is going to look like, and I colored it in to give a sense of the color palette. And you can see I've got, like, I had some alternate head shapes. So in that case, the client wasn't sure what shape the head they want. And so I had a few alternatives, and we went with this one. And so typically when someone hires me, I'll start by drawing it. We'll talk a little bit about what they want, unless, of course, they sometimes maybe have a drawing already, and I just have to adapt that. And then once we decide on a design, then I get a deposit, I get the materials, and I start buying materials and working on piece by piece. And I typically will start with hand and rod puppets. We'll use this kind of foam, this 1/2-inch upholstery foam, which works really well to create the structure of the puppet. And then we'll take that same pattern we made with the foam and make it out of the fleece. Typically, I use fleece. It could be polar fleece like this, like what our jackets and blankets are made of. Or, yeah, polar fleece is the best, honestly, in terms of cost and accessibility. And then sometimes you can use Antron fleece, which is what Lucky Duck is made of. And that is what they call Muppet fleece. And it's a little more expensive. I think it's a higher quality, but it's just, you know, when you're comparing $9 a yard to $30 a yard, it just makes a lot of sense for people that are starting out or even just operating at a budget to use the polar because it looks pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people will just assume, like, oh, you can't build a puppet unless you have, like, the good stuff, like the stuff that the Muppets use. When really you can just make it out of anything. I mean, as long as it looks good and is comfortable to perform, like something like this, that's literally just a blanket with, like, a couple of sliced Easter eggs, you know.
That's a gorgeous puppet. You did a great job.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, I have a puppet right here. I'll show you. I made this. I made this little earthworm here. He's a little mechanical tabletop puppet earthworm, and he's made out of a pair of socks I found at the dollar store.
Oh, wow.
And it worked so well. He'd already had this pattern, and I was able to just kind of make a little mouth mac and then stuff it. And that's, you know, I agree completely. Like, it is really nice when you have access to the higher quality stuff. I'll agree with that. Like, I think that that's nice. And there are things that it does well, but it definitely does not mean you can't. Like you said, you can find great materials, blankets and robes. I have a puppet made of a robe. I have puppets made of, you know, all kinds of things. And we just built on, me and my followers on TikTok. Yeah, on TikTok we built a puppet out of stuff we found at the dollar store.
This is just a pillowcase. I saw that. I was going to mention that.
Really?
Yeah, just a pillowcase with some, like, coat hangers right here. Thank you very much. And yeah, but, you know, you didn't. Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. And, like, really, if it looks good and, like, if it's comfortable for you to perform, then that's really all you need to worry about, I think. Like,
I agree completely.
Yes, exactly. Now the next question. Oh, here comes this is probably my favorite question to ask any puppeteer.
Yeah.
Do you have any, like, really crazy or weird experience that, looking back right now, you always laugh at? Like,
that's a good
question.
Let me think about that. A really crazy or funny experience. Well, I definitely have had a few shoots where it was just a little bit wild how much, you know, one of the things about working on smaller productions, independent productions, is that, and especially working with people that have never shot puppets before, I would say, like, a lot of the time when I'm working on film, I'm working with people that have never worked with puppets, and it's really nice when they recognize that you're a consultant, basically, and they pay you a little extra for that because you're doing more work.
Yeah.
Like, you should just, if someone already knows how to shoot puppets, you just show up and do your job. But if you need to spend time coaching them on what to bring and how to shoot them and why it's important, then some productions will recognize that that's an extra skill set, and some don't see that at all. But I've had a few shoots, and I won't tell you which ones, where they just wanted a lot from us, and I just couldn't believe that we actually got through all of it in terms of just the amount of pages or sequences we had to get through in one day. I've also been on a couple of tours, you know, where some of these smaller tours, the actors and the puppeteers drive the van, and, you know, we're doing 3 shows in one city. We come into a city, we set up for 4 hours, we do 3 shows, we pack down for 2 hours, and then we drive into the night to the next city to set up the next morning. And it was just like, just wild, man. Like, it probably shouldn't have been organized that way, but looking back on it, very funny, very cool. And I'm trying to think about another. I mean, you know, some pretty interesting experiences I've had, or like I got to throw the first pitch game as the T-Rex, which was pretty cool to be at Citi Field in Queens and do that. That was a pretty interesting experience. And also just a couple times that sometimes people will they won't recognize me, but if we get to talking about puppetry, it turns out that they know Snug's house, and that's a really cool thing. Just to meet someone who knows your work without knowing you.
Yeah, that was like when you discovered me on TikTok, I think it was, and you're like, hey, you make really good puppets. You do a good job. I'm like, oh, thanks. And then I looked at your YouTube channel, I'm like, wait, you're Snug? And you're like, yeah. I'm like, oh my god, I used to watch that as a kid.
That is so funny.
They have no clue.
That was so cool.
Yeah. You know, I think for me, I've had a lot of crazy experiences where, like, you know, people will not understand, like, you need a monitor. The puppeteer needs to see what they're doing. Like, this needs to be good. Like, I remember one time it was for, I'm not going to get into detail too much, but it was for a video shoot for something that my church was doing. And I had to puppeteer, like, under a couch. And I'm claustrophobic, too, which was the worst part. I had to puppeteer under the couch. And it was like a Goodwill. It was like a Goodwill couch, too. They didn't even bother washing, which was the worst part.
Oh, no.
Oh, God. And it was a heavy puppet, too. Like, there was a mechanism. It was a dragon. I get him out, but he's packed away. It was a dragon with, like, a metal rod that manipulated his wings and stuff. It was really, really big, really heavy. Yeah, and I had to handle him all on my own and everything, and it was insane.
That's amazing. And let me ask, you make all these puppets behind you. You make all of them, huh?
Yes. All the ones you see are made by me, with the exception of like maybe 2 in the whole room. Oh, thank you.
How long have you been building puppets for?
Since I was 12, so that'd be about 4 years now.
Oh my gosh, you're 16?
Yes.
You are so good, man. You're in such a good position. I talked to another person. I'm another kind of popular puppet TikToker that I know, similar age, and we were talking once, and I just was like, you guys are in such a good position. I was 22 when I really decided to pursue puppets seriously. You know, you guys, you're going to go into your adult careers with all this experience where you've already worked, you already know how to work on a monitor. I had to figure it out. I had to do little projects and just practice on the set. And luckily, I kind of had an aptitude for it. But it takes a long time to get used to. Your lip sync is already going to be great. Like, you're just starting from this really awesome place. Because part of my job is also I train puppeteers. I've worked with a lot of adult actors in their 20s and 30s who've never puppeteered before. And I train them because maybe they're in the cast of the show I built puppets for. And I just think it's really wonderful to me to see talented, driven people like yourself who are getting such a nice head start. And I think, you know, you already obviously offer a lot to this art form, and I'm excited to see what you do going forward even.
Thank you very much. And I think it's great too, now that we have all this stuff online, like there's so many resources for puppeteers, like, you know, it's
way more than
when
I started.
A lot more you can do now. Yeah.
When I started, I mean, I always talk about, I'm sure you know Adam Krutinger. His work his tutorials are so comprehensive, and although I would always say, like, think outside the box, you don't have to, like you said, like, you can work with materials, especially when you're starting out or if you're operating on a budget. You can do a lot. I mean, heck, you know, I built puppets for the recent tour of Mystery Science Theater 3000, and some of the elements for that show were from the dollar store. That's where I got, like, working with Joel and the other builder on that show. I was like, wow, even at this level, they'll go to the dollar store and get a bunch of golf balls, and that's what we made Tom Servo's legs out of, you know, because it works, because it exists. You have that shape, and you can cut them, you can drill them, you can paint them, and make them into things they weren't before. And so as much as I love getting to learn, oh, what's this material that, they use at the upper levels, and can I get it, and how do I work with it? I love that, but I also love going, oh, what can I make out of this, this plastic trumpet here that I got for $2? Because actually, if you saw that design, the guy has trumpet ears, so we're going to use these as his ears.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's for a professional gig that someone's paying me, for, which is really exciting. And like you said, I'm glad you mentioned not just looks good, it has to be comfortable to perform. That's almost the most important, because I've worked with puppets that don't look that great, but you can bring life to them in a way where people are charmed by it, but if it's uncomfortable to perform, you're just suffering that whole show or that shoot,
Yeah, exactly. And I remember when I first started, I assumed okay, I gotta get a hold of the good stuff. I need the fancy supplies. I remember I knew my art teacher made stuff with fabrics and that. I'm like, okay, where do you get Antron fleece? She was like, I don't even know what that is. And so I had to work from just raw material,
Yeah. I mean, Antron is great because it is a little easier to hide the seams. And I do like the texture that it has. Lucky Duck has a certain texture, but Polar works so well. It's so accessible, and it's so cheap. And you don't even need to go buy it by the yard. You can go buy a blanket from Walmart that's made of fleece and use that.
That's what I use for this.
Look at that guy. Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah. Yes.
That's great.
This is all raw material. His shirt's just made out of rags and stuff like that. And that's just a fabric napkin or something.
Yeah.
And, it's all raw material.
You've done a great job. It's great.
Oh, thank you.
That's wonderful, man. I mean, I'm so impressed. I mean, you're so much further ahead of where I was when I was your age. Although when I was your age, I guess the only puppetry I was really doing was I was doing stop motion. When I was 16, I started a series called Tinfoil Bob, which is still on YouTube. And I'm actually thinking about bringing it back as a live puppet form. But I did I had this little tinfoil guy, and he went on these little adventures where he'd run into crazy toys and clay characters and stuff.
That's awesome.
But I got a little bit, I always say one of the reasons I went into puppetry is I'm too lazy to be an animator.
That was the same for me. I did a bit of stop motion with, let me see if I can get a hold of one. How I started was I did stop motion with, if anyone remembers these Muppet figures that they made in the early 2000s. Yeah. And the thing was, with some of them, like this one, for instance, with Kermit, his arms only move one way. So I had trouble, there was limited on what movements I could do. And I was, I remember it took me almost a day to just do one scene of him just walking across the floor. And I was so lazy. I'm like, screw it, I'm going to do puppetry. It'll get done a lot faster.
That's what I love is, you can put in a whole day or weeks of work, and then you have a certain amount of film, and that's all you'll ever have. Whereas, with a puppet, you can put in maybe that same amount of work, but then you have a puppet that you can, animate until it falls apart, over the course of years.
Oh, yes. Oh, that puppet's amazing, too.
Thank you. That's Lucky Duck. And I did, because he's my main character, and because I built him to do both live shows and I wanted to do film stuff with him, I did go with the Antron fleece. And I got to say, I love it. But in terms of just building something quickly and for it to be effective, Polar is the way to go. This would only be for very special things, or if I'm building for somebody. That's what I like about when the levels of the material cost is someone can contact me about building them a puppet, and I can say, well, if we go with the top materials, this is what it costs. And they'll go, okay, maybe that's too much. And I say, great, well, we can go with the next level down of materials, and that's what it costs. And then they'll, it gives them some options. Hello.
Hello.
It's great to meet you.
It's great to meet you too, Lucky. Now, the next is, I'm not going to say a negative question, but it's just something I ask a lot of my guests. What are some of your pet peeves when it comes to puppetry?
Oh, that's a good idea.
You don't like.
Well, so I'm going to preface it with, I think that everybody should be part of this art form. I like to make this art form as inclusive as possible. So I don't ever like to say things. I don't want anyone to think, oh, is he talking about me? Because I know that we're all at different levels and we all have different styles. But things that I look for when I'm directing that can bother me, because I've been in the very fortunate position of directing a lot of puppetry, is obviously lip sync. I think lip sync is very important, and it does bother me when I see being very good. I think if you let the puppet just go dead,
just let it sink.
Yeah. And then just sort of, and it's like one of those things too, where they aren't just alive when they're talking, they're listening. You know, this is a living being who's breathing and thinking and reacting to what you're saying. And, you know, if they can blink, they blink, or if they can't, they're just nodding, or whatever type of movement they can do. But I think, like, aside from things that other puppeteers do, one of my biggest is actually from the rest of the industry who don't understand what this art is, and that it is an art form in and of itself, and that it's different. It's not the same as shooting live actors or having. It's not the same as a cartoon. It's its own thing. You said people will not understand that you need a monitor, and that's a thing I've had to have that conversation so many times, and it's at the point. I'll tell you what. There was even a day on Snug where we had an off-site shoot and they forgot to bring a monitor. With the
yes, I can
they got
hear you now.
A phone. So that kind of stuff. I've also been to a few auditions for some of it. Basically, when it requires to shoot or have puppets on stage and they don't want to give you a monitor or mic you properly, or when they audition for a puppet show or a puppet role and they don't have you touch a puppet at all. Those are some of my pet peeves.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people just assume, you know, like everything. There are not a lot of people, but some people who think like acting and, you know, pretty much all stage performing is the same. So they won't even really train you when you're puppeteering that much. Like, you know, not put that much thought into it, if you know what I mean.
Yes, I agree. That's like a thing. People think they can just put a puppet on their hand and stick it up in the camera and that they're going to be just as good at
and just do a voice. Then that's all you people do. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like. Yeah, no,
me,
that's yours. And you need to hire people that know it.
Yeah. For me, I mean, I'm not sure this has happened to you a lot, because when you do it as a career, it isn't as common. But for people like me who are just starting off, people think, oh, it's just a hobby. Like, it's not something you actually do for a living. And I think, now this may sound really stupid, but this is how I can tell if people understand it. If like they find out what you do and they'll say like, oh, you're a puppeteer, that's when I think, yeah, there you go. They know how this works. But if they say, oh, you do puppets, I think, okay, I don't know about this. Like, we probably don't really know how this works.
Hey, are you still doing the acting thing, you know, or whatever?
Yeah, exactly.
Or like people will the way they phrase it sometimes gives away.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting. People, I often wonder, even now, I'm 10 years into a career, do anything else, and people like, oh, but like, what do you do like to pay the bills? And job. That's all I do is I puppeteer, I act, and I make things.
Now the next question we have, now we got just 2 more questions left, then we'll reach the end.
Okay.
So the next question: what are your hopes for the future of puppetry?
That's a great question. I really hope that more and more talented folks like yourself will come into the industry, and that in so doing, we will not only have, because to me, can you hear me still?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Competition and inspiration, because we have both, right? Like,
yeah,
you know, maybe you and I will go out for the same role, but then the other one's going to do something else, and we're both going to see what the other one did, and we're going to be inspired. So you have competition, you have inspiration, and you have collaboration, because then we got to work together on something too. And I want to see that happen.
And even I like what you said earlier about how with an audition, like you know that if you put like all you can into it, then you'll know you didn't do bad. You just weren't what they were looking for.
Exactly.
That's good advice right there. And now, very last question. What advice would you give to aspiring puppeteers?
I would say just do it every day. Start making puppets. If you don't know how, make something out of it. Make a paper bag, make a sock. Or there are a lot of great, I think people should try to make their own characters if they can, because it just, for nothing else, that like if you have a video take off with a puppet that's not your design, you can have issues where you want to maybe do something with that puppet, but you don't own the intellectual property. So that's an idea. But if you, just to get started, I started with a puppet from Silly Puppets. It was one of the orange monsters. I named him Murray. And when I started doing a lot with him and I was like, oh, I feel like I really know this guy. Well, let me make some characters of my own. Let me try. And I built a bunch of really bad puppets. And then I started making okay ones. Eventually I started getting paid to build puppets for other people and other productions. So I would say practice every day. Start making things and start, practice your lip sync, practice your voices. Set up a camera with a monitor if you can, attach it to your TV and practice being on stage, practice on screen, practice your arm in the air. Do it every day, because it really does take sometimes years to get it so you just start talking and your hand moves with it automatically and you don't even think about it.
Yeah.
Or, to get used to being on camera especially. So I would just say, if you want to do this, you should do it, and just start today and do it every day and do whatever you can.
Yeah. And I think one thing I should say, and you mentioned you built some horrible puppets and then better puppets later. It's a trial and error process. Like, you might or might not do good. It's something you should definitely keep trying at. So
Absolutely.
we've now reached the end of the show. Do you want to sign off with a character or something?
Yeah, sure. I'll bring Lucky Duck back out here for a second. Lucky, you want to come say hi?
Hello. Oh my goodness, it was so much fun. Thank you so much for having us today.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Oh, I like your friend there. What's your name, my friend?
Well, my name is Scrump. And,
Scrump?
I was supposed to be the host of this show, but they don't let us puppets host it. They let
you know
the
what?
humans do it.
Yeah, I noticed that. These humans, they're always in the way. Well, I'm so glad we got to be here today, and we love each and every one of you, and we thank you so much for having us on your show.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
It was so fun.
Yes. Thank you for coming on the show. Make sure to tune in next time for our next episode of Puppetry Chat. Who's going to be the guest next? We don't know. Leave your suggestions in the comments below. Thank you all for watching. Thank you, Chris and Lucky, for joining us. And goodbye.
Take care.
If you like what you just saw, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below and tap the bell for more. See you soon.